Canto 3, Chapter 25, verse 27. 3, 25, 27. Continuing from the last verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Asevayayam Prakratir Gunanam. Is it on the screen? No, it's not on the screen. Jnanena Vairagya Vrajim Britena Yogena Maya Arpitaya Cha Bhaktya Mam Pratyag Atmanam Iva Varundhe. Thus, by not engaging in the service of the modes of material nature, but by developing Krishna consciousness, knowledge, in renunciation, and by practicing yoga, in which the mind is always fixed in devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one achieves my association in this very life. For I am the Supreme Personality, the Absolute Truth. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. When one engages in devotional service to the Lord in the 9 different kinds of bhakti yoga, as enunciated in authoritative scriptures such as hearing, shravanam, chanting, kirtanam, remembering, offering worship, praying, and offering personal service, either in one of them or 2 or 3 or all of them, he naturally has no opportunity to engage in the service of the 3 modes of material nature, unless one has good engagements in spiritual service. It is not possible to get out of the attachment to material service. Those who are not devotees, therefore, are interested in so-called humanitarian or philanthropic work such as opening a hospital or charitable institution. These are undoubtedly good works in the sense that they are pious activities, and the result is that the performer may get some opportunities for sense gratification either in this life or in the next. Devotional service, however, is beyond the boundary of sense gratification. It is completely spiritual activity. When one engages in the spiritual activities of devotional service, naturally, he does not get any opportunity to engage in sense gratificatory activities. Krishna conscious activities are performed not blindly, but with perfect understanding of knowledge and renunciation. This kind of yoga practice, in which the mind is always fixed upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead in devotion, results in liberation in this very life. The person who performs such acts gets in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya therefore approved the process of hearing from realized devotees about the pastimes of the Lord. It does not matter to what category of this world the audience belongs. If one meekly and submissively hears about the activities of the Lord from a realized soul, he will be able to conquer the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is unconquerable by any other process. Hearing or associating with devotees is the most important function for self-realization. Powerful. This is verse 27 from chapter 25. Chapter 25 is the glories of devotional service. And glories of devotional service are passed on from one generation to the next generation, or one teacher to students who become eventually teachers, etc. By that, what the medium is association, sadhu-sanga, because that's the topic, sadhu-sanga. By sadhu-sanga, in the association of sadhus, it's quite natural. One does with sadhus what sadhus do. Pretty logical. Because the sadhus aren't going to do other things. And one who wants and gets the good fortune of sadhu-sanga does with sadhus what sadhus do, bhajana kriya, activities of devotional hearing and chanting. So that's the sadhu-sanga activity. It's bhajana kriya, but bhajana, it starts with hearing and chanting, and then it moves to other activities, but the foundation is hearing and chanting. The foundation is sound. Just like yesterday evening at Northeastern, the topic was mysteries of sound. So without doing the whole class again, material sound has its impact, for sure. Spiritual sound has its impact, for sure. And spiritual sound does all of what mode of goodness sound does plus. Or mode of goodness sound doesn't do what spiritual sound does. Minus. Because spiritual sound, it being spiritual, is of the same quality as the soul. Spiritual sound is of the same quality as Krishna, which is of the same quality as the soul. And so spiritual sound acts on the platform of the soul. So Prabhupada is saying in this purport, doesn't matter what's the background of the audience. It doesn't matter what the background is for spiritual sound to work or sadhu-sanga to have an impact. Sadhu-sanga, even on living entities that are not in the human form of life. Let's just take Lord Chaitanya or Krishna. I don't know if you captured it on the Saturday evening topic. The topic was Krishna's travel from Dwaraka all the way to the eastern side to Mithila to see his two devotees, Bahalashva and Shruttadev. And the description in that chapter is passing along the roadway, because Krishna traveled, he can travel without a road or without a chariot, but he was in his chariot with Dwaraka driving. And as he passed through villages and towns, etc., people saw him and he saw them. And just by his glance, they became lifted. By their seeing him, they became lifted. They became fearless, free from their material affinities, just by seeing him. Powerful. Now, it doesn't say what sounds Krishna was making, but contact with Krishna in any form is purifying. And the instrument for association is especially effective through sound. So Krishna speaking Bhagavad Gita, or in this case, Kapila Dev speaking to Devahuti. Because Devahuti's question, we discussed this during the home program on Saturday, Krishna's was it Saturday or Sunday? Saturday? Saturday. Sunday. So on Sunday, we heard the previous verse and, a whole description leading up to this one. Sound vibration is a natural benefit that comes from sadhu-sanga. It's because that's what sadhus do, is they hear and chant. And one associates, one gets the opportunity to hear their sound. And one hears their sound, one gets Krishna, because that's what their sound is that transcendental sound. That's what sadhus do. And so one gets benefit, transcendental benefit. There's sound that, let's do it again, just said it before, there's sound that doesn't give transcendental benefit. That sound that doesn't give transcendental benefit is material sound. And in the modes of nature, there's different sounds. But it's a vibration sound that has an impact on consciousness. And spiritual sound, the impact on consciousness in the sense, this is a Sankhya topic, which comes in the next chapter 26, but a Sankhya topic is, according to the body, material sound is going to impact differently. The auditory sense of different species extends higher or lower than the human range, but material sound impact consciousness. Just this morning, I was listening to Prabhupada discussing this in Los Angeles in a morning walk, that according to the body type, let's say species, and even among species, types among species, sound vibration is going to impact differently. For example, language. Animals don't have they experiment to try to teach chimpanzees or something, from birth to speak, and they get a certain number of words from chimpanzee. Anyway, without all the science thing, sound has a different impact based upon the body type. And making sound has a different capacity according to the consciousness of the living entity. But consciousness in the material sphere has everything to do, 100% has everything to do with the body. The covering of the soul. Consciousness is constant, as the soul is constant. But consciousness extends itself into the world depending upon the covering. The modes of nature, the body type, etc., etc., etc. But consciousness is there. So the human form of life has the particular capacity to withdraw from affinity from the temporary and direct affinity towards the spiritual. And what's in this purport, this morning's verse, is spiritual sound goes beyond the boundary or the limits of material sound. If I can find that sentence. don't see the sentence. But spiritual sound has that capacity that material sound doesn't have. Spiritual sound can carry one to that which is eternal, because it is eternal, and by sound, consciousness may connect. Then, there's another variable besides body type. So each of us has a body type. And there's modes of nature and karma and coverings, although we're in the same species. And then the effectiveness of sound has everything to do with where you invest your consciousness while hearing that in sound. According to scripture, faith is a major factor in determining where one hears and the intensity of one's hearing, both. I was just spending some time yesterday. I was asked, going down, heading towards Bhadra Purnima, to give a class on Bhadra Purnima. So in Bhadra Purnima, or the verse in the Bhagavatam, 12:13 says, if you do this, then that happens. And that happens is one gains entrance into the transcendental realm, giving a gift of Srimad Bhagavatam on Bhadra Purnima. It's in relation to this morning's verse. I'll just share this little piece and then come back. That which is spiritual, Srimad Bhagavatam is spiritual, and the holy name is spiritual. So it's statements found in scripture that describe the glories of the holy name, or the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, in this case, making a gift of Srimad Bhagavatam, etc., is not a mere exaggeration. To think, we know from the 10 offenses against the holy name, to think that the glories of the holy name are exaggeration, that's one of the 10 offenses, called artavad. Vada means doctrine of arta. Benefits are just exaggeration. There are exaggerations in Vedic texts of benefits and detriments. If you do this, this will come. If you don't do this, then that will come. And they can be exaggerated on either end. Too much glorification, too much defamation, in order to align people with, progressive life. When the subject matter, it has to do with matter, but there's subject matter that doesn't have anything to do with matter. The holy name doesn't have anything to do with matter. It may be perceived as a material sound. That's okay. It's not a material sound, whatever the perception. Coverings may say it's a material sound, not a material sound. Thinking that it's a material sound doesn't make it a material sound. Supposing one thinks it's a spiritual sound, then the benefits one is going to derive, one will derive, depends everything upon the faith that one has in the transcendentalness of that sound, as well as the benefits that come from hearing that sound. I'll say it again. The benefit derived from chanting has everything to do with our faith and the effort that we invest in making that connection. There's benefit regardless, even if you're asleep. There's benefits regardless. But to get the full benefit, then faith and the attentiveness that one invests in, those two things. Attentiveness with faith. It's very similar to the class that we had yesterday evening, this definition of yoga, right? There were two verses from Patanjali Yoga. The definition of yoga, yogash, chittavritti nirodha. Yoga, by definition, is to cease the swirlings of the mind. Yoga is to cease the swirlings of the mind. And to practice yoga, then there's some elements that make practice effective. And one of those is faith. There's everyday practice, over a prolonged period of time, practice. Just like, listening to Radha practice piano. I mean, she's grown in her piano abilities in part because of practice. But there's also something, it will improve according to the attentiveness and the faith that one has, the feelings that one has about that activity. Some can become better, some can become not as good. And it's not a spiritual sound, but it's a skill, and there's a pleasure, a material pleasure that comes from mode of goodness sound. Anyway, same principle applies to yoga. Same principle applies to hearing the holy name. Faith factor, confidence that this is going to take me. It is and is going to take me to a transcendental place. Supposing one didn't have much enthusiasm for transcendentalness, one just has enthusiasm. I want to dial down the misery part of material existence. Then that may come, but it doesn't give the full benefit. Or there may be promise of rewards. If I do this, I'll get that. So there's the negative and there's the positive. But that's insufficient. Or to get the full benefit, faith is required. I mean, the practice of yoga has to be fulfilled with faith. And commensurate with faith, one's going to get benefit. Transcendental benefit. It has the potency of transcendental benefiting. And it's not an exaggeration. All of those benefits can come. However, it may take some time. Generally, it takes time. And therefore, it takes practice over time. But as piano practice, one can become more skilled. With japa, or the holy name of any form, can also expand depending upon the faith and the intention or attention behind the chanting. And the same can be said about Bhadra Purnima. Just do this and you get that. Is it an exaggeration? It's not artavad. It's not an inflated exaggeration. So there's two things. I'm just explaining something I'm going to be being asked to make a whole presentation on. Probably do it more than once before Bhadra Purnima. There's going to be different effects for different people by giving a gift of Srimad Bhagavatam on Bhadra Purnima. And it depends upon faith and intention. The potency is there. It's not an exaggeration. The potency is there. Just like, there's some examples that our acharyas give. When the four Kumaras smelled the incense and flowers at the gates of Vaikuntha, immediately their senses became completely enlivened. They went from Brahmavadis to Bhaktas just by smelling. Boom. So it may not happen like that. We may smell something that's offered to the deity and not boom, we're in Vaikuntha. But one can also say you're in Vaikuntha because it's the beginning of the path to get there. In Hari Bhakti Vilas, for example, in Hari Bhakti Vilas, Sanatana Goswami makes reference from Padma Purana that says, from Padma Purana, one who says even once these two syllables, ha, ri, they have begun their journey to the spiritual world. Now, sometimes it's said one is, immediately attains Vaikuntha, or one gets liberated just by saying, but he explains in Hari Bhakti Vilas, it means the journey has begun by once saying or hearing Hari, two syllables, or Krishna, or Rama. Journey has begun. Saying this description, the benefit of gifting Srimad Bhagavatam, the journey has begun. One receives something very wonderful. The journey has begun. And in relation to spiritual sound, like the chanting of the holy name, or spiritual sound, that which emanates from Srimad Bhagavatam, it's all spiritual. There's no inflated exaggeration about the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam or the glories of the holy name or the glories of the deity form of the Lord or the glories of residing in a sacred place like Vrindavan or the glories of serving Vaishnavas. That was embedded in the story that I told on Saturday evening from chapter 86 of Canto 10, when Krishna goes to meet Shrutadev and Bahulashva. That's what he says to Shrutadev. You, Shrutadev, as well as Bahulashva, you haven't come to see me in Dwaraka because you made a vow that you would stay and worship your deity every day. You kept your vow. But please know that seeing me, worshiping the deity and seeing me is not different than serving these sages that came with me. It is serving me. So you can't take the sages with you. You can't take the sages with you. Or they may come and they may go. Your deity won't come and go. So these 5 items, according to Rupa Goswami, summarizing all the teachings of the Vedic texts, these 5 items, if any one of them is performed without offense, then that is sufficient to at once awaken Bhava Bhakti. One gets entrance into Bhava Bhakti by any one of those without offense. So it's important to do without offense. The chanting of the holy name, or hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, or worshipping one's deity. So that the practice is to do the positive and refrain from the negative. And that's what's in this verse, and I'm going to end. The negative is free from the modes of nature. Let's go back to the previous verse. It's connected. The previous verse. The process of Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of mystic power, semicolon. When one is actually situated on that path of devotional service, he is able to control the mind. Able to control the mind, and then next comes being freed from the modes of nature. So the modes of nature push the mind. Have you noticed? Sometimes and sometimes and sometimes. Modes of nature push matter. That includes the body and the mind. So when one comes to the stage of bhakti practice, that one is very strongly absorbed in any one of these 5 things, or specifically hearing the glories of the personality of Godhead, because that's what's in the previous verse, by hearing, although one may be distracted by hearing gradually with great attention and faith, same principle, yoga principles as Patanjali teaches, with great attention and faith, the modes of nature stop. They stop impacting consciousness. Although you have a body and a mind, they stop impacting consciousness. The modes of nature stop impacting the consciousness of such a devotee. That is to say, one can surpass material influence. Say it negatively. Without making that connection, one is going to be pushed this way and that way by the modes of nature, both body and mind. And it comes out of the body in different ways according to one's age, one's psychophysical nature, and this and that. And the pushing is going to be different. But the eligibility doesn't matter. Excuse me. The eligibility, like what mode of nature are you in? Or is he in, or she in, or they in? Doesn't matter. What matters is hearing the sound with attention and faith. And serving the persons who are capable of vibrating that transcendental sound very purely. And the other processes of bhakti. Then the impact of the modes of nature stop. The swirling, the chitta-vritti, the swirling of the ocean doesn't stop because the wind moves water. The wind is more subtle. Air is more subtle than water. The wind, which is more subtle, moves water. So the mind, similarly, becomes moved by desire. And the idea is not to stop desire. The idea is to purify desire. And when purified desire comes, then the mind is peaceful. Is it possible? In this modern world with da 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 and da 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 da, is it possible? Yes. It's resting upon principle, spiritual sound. And then the consciousness that it becomes awakened by spiritual sound and the quieting of the chitta-vritti, the waves and the whirlpools and the swirlings of the mind. One can become peaceful. Not just peaceful. One can become fixed by sound. And that's what this verse is saying. In this very life. Text 27. I'll read the sentence again. The whole verse is one sentence. By not engaging in the service of the modes of material nature, but by developing Krishna consciousness, knowledge in renunciation, and by practicing yoga, so 3, Krishna consciousness, knowledge in renunciation, and by practicing yoga, in which the mind is always fixed in devotional service under the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one achieves my association in this very life. For I am the Supreme Personality, the Absolute Truth. And he's talking to his mother. But she already knows these things. But he's confirming what she already knows, because her question was, how do I overcome my too much affinity for the temporary? As if she had affinity for the temporary. So he's giving the answer. We also have the answer. Any discussion?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
So you talked about sadhu-sanga, a good association.
Yes.
And how it impacts our life in a good way. What about bad association?
What about it?
Like, how do we avoid it, especially growing? Like, we will start, there's no choice, but you have to associate with people with bad intentions.
Well, there's different levels of what you can do. I mean, a strong level is be good association and you're protected from bad association. You carry bhakti and bhakti will protect you. So it's not that when you're in bad association, the bhakti has to run the other way because yuck, cesspool, smelly, I'm going the other way. Phew. It's not that one has to do that. No, one may do that depending upon the circumstance. But the general principle is if I, at whatever age and stage of life, what I do is I'm carrying bhakti within and I'm conscious that the atmosphere around me is toxic or unwholesome. And I want to remain wholesome and I want sadhu-sanga. I mean, the question you're asking, I've been asked maybe 50 times by young people. In school, there's no sadhu-sanga, so what do I do? Be good association. By being a nimitta or an instrument, you're in a place where there's people that are either innocent or malicious. And then you act a little, you behave a little differently towards the innocent than you do to the malicious. But in either case, you're protected from unwholesomeness by carrying bhakti. That is to say, I want to give. Think in your mind for a moment. Of course, this is Prabhupada, but think of the photographs that you've seen of Prabhupada sitting in the midst of creatures called human beings that were, deep in the lower modes of nature. And what Prabhupada didn't avoid that, so he didn't run the other way and hold his nose. What did he do? He was giving bhakti. No, he was doing it directly. But in some cases, it was just being friendly and not, so much giving them a Bhagavad Gita class. He gave Bhagavad Gita classes for people who wanted a Bhagavad Gita class, but otherwise, he was giving association. Here's a similar example, it's different. Sali Agrawal, when Prabhupada came to America, he stayed in Butler, Pennsylvania at Gopal Agrawal and Sali Agrawal's home. And Sali Agrawal, in an interview later, said, Swamiji was always very kind. He would speak about any topic. And somehow he would turn that, because she was Sali Agrawal, somehow he would turn that topic into a Krishna topic. Because that was what was inside. So he was spiritualizing the material modes of nature that she was influenced by his wholesomeness, and that protected him from the unwholesomeness. Or here's another one. It's the same principle. When he left Butler, Pennsylvania, where did he go? He went to New York. Where did he go? Where did he go in New York? He had contacted Dr. Mishra. The name's familiar, right? Dr. Mishra. How did he know about Dr. Mishra? When he was still in India, he asked one of his acquaintances, I think it was one of the printers, or, the people involved in the printing industry. Do you have any acquaintances living now in America? And one of them said, yes, Dr. Mishra. So when Prabhupada was still in India, he wrote to Dr. Mishra. And when he left Butler, Pennsylvania, he had written to Dr. Mishra, do you have a place where I can stay? Because he didn't have anything. So he stayed down the street. Dr. Mishra had an apartment, and down the street was this little office that had no windows, and that's where he stayed. Prabhupada stayed. But Prabhupada and Dr. Mishra regularly interacted. So later, Dr. Mishra was interviewed. What was it like? And his comments, Dr. Mishra's comments was, Swamiji was always very kind to me. Now, Dr. Mishra was a Mayavadi. And, did Prabhupada have gentleness in relation to Mayavadis? He would speak about the teaching, not the character of the person, but the teachings in, very strong way. But his social skill was such that Dr. Mishra loved him because he treated Dr. Mishra so kindly. And it wasn't manipulation, it was culture. But by Prabhupada being kind in the way that he was kind to Dr. Mishra's bhakti life began from, a place of impersonalism to a place of appreciating a pure devotee and serving a pure devotee. So, in short, in answer to your question, by being an instrument of Krishna, you'll be protected. The difficulty is forgetting who you are, really, in the transcendental sense of who you are. And then, to the degree that you forget who you are, you're susceptible to bad association. So protection for you, for any one of us, is remember who you are. So that's the main business, is to know who you are. To know who you are means a lot. You unpack that one and it's a whole bunch of things. You're not, a teenage girl growing up in America. That's a covering. So you deal with that circumstance, but that's not who you are. And so being mindful of who you are, that is, I am the eternal part and parcel of Krishna meant for his service and pleasure. And so you cultivate that and you're protected from unwholesome. Now, some association you do want to move away from. Distance yourself because this person or this circumstance is very harmful. Don't stay in radioactive places. You move. So some association is directly to be given up, and other association is you spiritualize according to the capacity that Krishna has given you to spiritualize, but at least you'll be protected by bhakti. And then contemplating, how can I give bhakti in this circumstances, that circumstance, and another circumstance? And then we can navigate our way through unwholesomeness safely.
Yes, thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, in the example of Dhruva Maharaj, he had the faith in the sound that it will give him the kingdom. If he chanted the sound, eventually he will get the kingdom. He had that faith. But I don't think he had the faith in the transcendentalness of the sound. So
why do you say that?
his focus was completely on the material.
That's the gain. But why the transcendentalness of the sound, he had no faith? Why do you say that?
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Okay, I'm not either. I mean, the seed was Narada's association. From his mother, Vishnu can give you your kingdom. How do I find Vishnu? Go to the forest. He went to the forest. Couldn't find Vishnu. Narada came. Narada examined him. Narada said, here's how you can get Vishnu. Now, Vishnu is transcendental, but, yes, his objective was material, but Vishnu is transcendental. So the transcendental can give anything, including material or spiritual. The transcendentalness came from Narada. The gift was from Narada. Now, he may have had a greater or lesser degree of realization of that as he went on, of the transcendentalness of his mantra. The process itself was material. The austerities and this and that, certainly material. Certainly material.
Thank you, Maharaj.
But it's like, the growing of something. The journey had begun. Some faith was there, imparted to him, some intrinsic faith. Otherwise, how could he do what he did? Yes, the fuel in his tank was kingdom, revenge, get back. But there was transcendentalness to some degree, especially imparted, starting with his mother, but then further from Narada. So there was there, at least in a seed form. Okay.
Maharaj, regarding the Bhadra Purnima glorification, there are two conditions that are put in that verse. One,
golden throne.
yes. So one is the astrological condition, the sun elevated to the position of Leo, and
Yeah, right.
and the second one is the golden throne. Now, you brought a very, very important point, which is not stated directly in the verse, which is the mood with which the gift of Srimad Bhagavatam is given. If that mood is outside the range of modes of material nature, then the intended effect would be there.
It's your comment is like his.
Little bit.
Little bit. So one may want the benediction in a very material way. Let me out of here. This place is crazy. Let me get to the place that's not crazy. If this is a ticket to get to the place that's not crazy, I'll do it, because I don't like this crazy place. I want out of here. So that's different than I want to be with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in loving service. And there's, big spectrum in between. Is that on the topic that you wanted to bring up?
I was also relating to how Kapil Dev had mentioned about the performance of devotional service in three modes of material nature. So
that comes later. That's chapter 29.
Mm-hmm. So if that act of giving Srimad Bhagavatam is also performed within the modes of material nature, because of the consciousness,
well, most likely it will be.
Would it have the same effect?
The seed is there. Even when the modes of nature are operating, the seed is there. Back to this question, that he wanted it, passion. I'm a Kshatriya. I can't follow it. The Brahminical method that you're advocating, Narada. I want a kingdom. I want to get back. Mode of passion. So, the seed is there from the get-go, even if the modes are operating. Look at us. So the fullest benefit comes, which happened to Dhruva. He went beyond the modes of nature. Can we go beyond the modes of nature? Yes. Easy? No. Possible? Yes. And what's required? Sadhu-sanga. And then the application of the principles that one receives from sadhu-sanga or from sadhu. Or bhakti will protect us and carry us beyond. Bhakti has that power. Depending on our faith, we'll get realization.
So to me, it seems like the exaggeration is not there in that claim, but
That's correct.
But then, what is actually played around with is the time it takes.
Yes, exactly.
And therefore, that's
Exactly.
where the purification journey comes into the picture.
Exactly. That's the topic. That's how I'm going to present this when I've been asked to present it. So I just gave a little mini summary here. The time factor is variable. What's the parameters that make that time factor shorter or longer? It's attentiveness and faith. Shorter or longer. Those two terms are mentioned specifically. Anything else?
There are a couple of questions online.
Really?
First question from Ankit Purohit Prabhu. My question is how to get away from others' negative comments and have a blessing heart when they criticize us. Blessing filled heart, I would say.
Bhakti. Come to the stage of pure bhakti and you've got it. You don't come to the stage of pure bhakti and then you're in mixed bhakti. And so you're not going to get to that place. So how to get to that place? Make your bhakti pure. How to make your bhakti pure? Sadhu-sanga. And that you apply with, same points. With faith and attentiveness. The most powerful forms of bhakti, starting with chanting of the holy name and hearing these glories, because that's what's in the previous verse, text 26, hearing the glories of the Lord's activities and his loving exchanges, hearing that attentively with faith. That's how you can get there. That's how. That's the how-to. Unpack it, or put it simple in the sutra, is sadhu-sanga.
Next question is from Leela Kardas Prabhu, who is asking, thank you Maharaj, our apologies. Invariably, there are many people who develop taste for bhakti. At the same time, someone may be encumbered by family pressures, etc.
Lots of people are.
I don't see there is any question. That's a comment.
Okay.
Oh no, it continues. How to handle situations if one feels one has to fulfill some obligations towards family, like, for example, arranged marriages and so.
Well, it takes intelligence. What do I turn left or right or go straight or pause or, it takes intelligence. And where do you get intelligence from? Krishna. How do I get intelligence from Krishna? Become qualified. The Krishna will give intelligence how to make decisions in all these matters when you're looking to him with a loving and serving mood. He's more than ready. Supposing I'm not looking to Krishna with a loving and serving mood, then by default it's the modes of nature, and one's intelligence is going to be influenced by the modes of nature, and I'll make unwise modes of nature decisions about how to deal with things. In other words, there's no substitute for purity. That's how to become pure in devotion. And then you'll have the intelligence from Krishna how to do what you need to do in the best way. Anything else?
Last question from Shriya Mataji. Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. You mentioned about hearing without offenses. Could you elaborate on offenses one may commit during hearing?
Well, you can take the 10 offenses in chanting of the holy name and apply it to the process of hearing. So if you want to understand what those 10 offenses are, there's abundant material about those 10 offenses. Abundant material about the 10 offenses. And here's 3 places to start to find out more about the 10 offenses. 1, I gave a seminar on Madhurya Kandamini, and that's a big topic in Madhurya Kandamini, overcoming offenses. It's not super elaborate, but it's in Madhurya Kandamini. And those classes are recorded. You can find out what's said by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, or get the book, or it's available online, and you can read about overcoming offenses, anartha nivritti. Second source to know more, Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote elaborately about it. Not that Prabhupada didn't, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote elaborately about it. And that's another source. And there's a third source that's I find is beneficial. Hari Parshad Prabhu has a YouTube channel. And on his YouTube channel, he's discussing Nectar of Instruction. And text 7 of Nectar of Instruction, he's giving 5 classes, about 2 hours each, including questions, on the 10 offenses. And that's like exhaustive. But back to the question, what is it, attentiveness in chanting, in hearing, how do I learn more about it? Or not being offensive when hearing. So it's in those 10 offenses against the holy name. Learn more about the 10 offenses against the holy name, and you'll understand about overcoming offenses in the process of hearing scripture or etc. Any sound, any spiritual sound, and becoming free from offense. In the room, anything else? Yes?
So usually my mood in chanting is not how to go back to Godhead, and mostly, Krishna, please give me good scores on my tests and stuff like that. So
that's your motive?
A lot of the time.
Okay.
I try to change that, but I sometimes have a hard time because my main focus right now is academics.
Yes.
So how do I change it?
Well, you don't have to stab it to death. That's not how you overcome it. It's like Dhruva and Dhruva's interest in getting his kingdom. That helped his attentiveness in his austerities and his mantra chanting. So, in the language of Sri Brahma Samhita, it's called Gona Dharma. Gona is derived from guna. So that which is not transcendental or secondary can become elevated by the direct process of bhakti itself. Or, in other words, continue as you're doing, recognizing this is in the modes of nature. It's not yet Shuddha, it's still in the modes of nature. But that's where I am right now, so let me accept that's where I am right now. And with faith, with attentiveness, try to elevate myself so that in course of time through elevation, that fades, and when that fades, something is left. So rather than feel bad about yourself or any of those other kinds of negative emotion things that don't really help bhakti at all, with faith and with attentiveness, continue with the process, knowing I need to move. My GPS is telling me I need to incrementally at least move a little bit this way, a little less that way. But so slow, gradual, evolving the core of who I really am, which is, the essence is not these gona things, or those things that are temporary and in the material atmosphere. They're important to me right now. So be honest with yourself, with your being, and recognize, the GPS is telling me that's not the destination. Let me move towards that destination in an incremental and gradual and faithful way. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.